I'm going to be sharing with you my #1 tip for making more money on Filmhub right now. No, it's not shooting that car chase that you can't afford. And no, you don't even have to shoot a Tarantino-style foot scene. This tip is something that I think is very overlooked just because I don't think Filmhub is doing a very great job of advertising it as an important piece of information that you need. This was something that I even overlooked for the first 2 years that I was on Filmhub. Doing this brought me from making pennies every month to hundreds of dollars. That tip is adding chapter breaks to your film. What does that mean exactly? Do you remember back in the old DVD days when you would go to the main home screen and there would be the scenes at the bottom that you could select? Or better yet, in the cable TV days, you'd have a commercial that would come on every 5 to 15 minutes during your favorite shows. Well, friends, that's essentially what you're doing. You're marking places on your film where an ad can be placed. So why does this matter exactly? The big reason is that Filmhub and the platforms are not going to do this for you. If this metadata isn't imported by you, then it's just going to get ignored. Because of this, you're not going to be able to get on AVOD platforms like Tubi or Vudu or anything else that utilizes the advertising-based video on demand model. In my opinion, AVOD platforms are the bread and butter for small independent filmmakers like myself. It tends to pay a lot better and you're not relying on small, insignificant subscription fees. Platforms like Tubi use the CPM model or cost per milli. YouTube actually utilizes the same model, which basically means that they are paying you a set ad rate for every 1,000 views. The CPM can range from pennies all the way up to tens of dollars. For an example, if you have a CPM of $10, that means the platform is going to pay you $10 for every 1,000 views. There's a little bit more nuance to that when it comes to YouTube, but that's the basic explanation of it. I don't know how Tubi's CPM model works, but I've heard down the grapevine from other filmmakers that this is what they use. And this is kind of really important to know too, because if you haven't noticed, a lot of these platforms, especially like Netflix and Amazon and HBO, are now starting to use the AVOD model. I personally make $200 to $300 a month just from Tubi because of the AVOD model. I don't know how they calculate these numbers, but $200 to $300 a month means that people are watching my small movie. Now, one of the best things about this is that it can be free to create these chapter breaks. If you haven't submitted your film yet on Tubi, then congratulations, you're going to be able to do this for free. However, if you've already submitted your film, then it's probably going to cost over $100 for them to open it up to you to put in the chapter breaks. It can be worth it in the long run, but that is something you want to keep in mind. So let's do a quick tutorial on how to create these. Okay, so conveniently, Tubi actually has some instructions on how to do this, so it's a pretty easy walkthrough. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into Filmhub, and then you're going to select your movie and edit it. Now, on the video page, right when you open it up, you're going to be met with your main file, the captions, and then the chapters. You're going to want to hit add, and then you're going to have a chapter pop up. So you have the chapter name, and then you have the time code, and then you have the thumbnail time code. Now, what I would do personally and what I did with my film is you're going to want to go into your film and watch it, and then mark spots where it's not going to be super disruptive for there to be an ad. Obviously, you don't want to do this in the middle of the scene or, something like that. So you're going to want to be paying attention to when the best places are in your film to put a chapter. Now, Filmhub does have some requirements for these. You're going to want to be paying attention to that. So let's go over their tips quickly. It is best to place a chapter after a scene's end or before a major lighting change. I kind of went over that, but the lighting change is something interesting to note too. Try to avoid placing ad breaks in the middle of a monologue, dialogue, or action sequence. Again, I just mentioned that you don't want to place one mid-scene. It is best to find a scene with black frames in between. If not available, use the time code of the first frame of the next scene/shot. And then Filmhub says that you can use their player to find the best places to identify chapter breaks. Now, a couple of other things that you're going to want to keep in mind is that you cannot have a chapter in the first or last 5 minutes. So you got to wait till at least after the first 5 minutes to place any sort of chapter. And of course, you can't do it in the last 5 minutes either. And obviously, you're probably not going to want to put one in the middle of the credits because nobody has done that ever. And it's just kind of annoying. So to continue, it says after the first chapter, each subsequent chapter must be every 8 to 12 minutes. Your first chapter break can be any point after 5 minutes. So my rule of thumb, just find a place roughly every 10 minutes or so. If you want to do 8 minutes to try to squeeze in more ads, be my guest. But I found that on average, when I've done this for myself and some of the people I've helped get their films on Filmhub, 10 minutes is roughly about where I found, a good place to put a chapter. Chapter 1 always starts at time code 00000. So obviously your first chapter is going to be your first scene. So what they're talking about is no chapters in the first 5 minutes. Your first 5 minutes is going to be your first chapter. So if your second chapter would be at 5 minutes and 1 second, if that makes sense. For titles less than 20 minutes, only 2 chapters are allowed. So you're going to want to keep that in mind if you're making short films. For titles less than 10 minutes, you're not allowed to have any chapters. So any short films under 10 minutes, sorry, you're kind of out of luck here. Anything over 10 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes, you're going to be able to put 2 in there. All time codes must be frame accurate, and frames in the time codes must match the video's frame rate or you will not be able to submit. For example, entering 27 at FF for 24 frames per second video is invalid. Okay, so now that we have an idea of what we need to be doing, let's go ahead and create some example chapters. So we know for our first chapter that we're gonna have to put the time code at 00000000, and I assume you could put the thumbnail at 000000002, but if you have a better thumbnail for a different part within that scene, you can go ahead and mark that as your time code. Okay, so I got my movie pulled up here. Normally you're gonna wanna do this in something like Adobe Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve so you can get the exact frame count on here, but I'm recording my audio currently for this tutorial in Premiere Pro, so I'm not gonna be able to do that. So we're just gonna have to suspend our disbelief here and just do this in QuickTime, but I'm just gonna kind of scroll through. So obviously we have to mark our first chapter break at 00000 as we mentioned. So we're going to want to go after 5 minutes. So I'm going to find a scene roughly after 5 minutes, and luckily my opening scene is more than 5 minutes. So this should be pretty easy to find. Okay, so we got a scene change right here. So you can see there's a pretty dramatic shift right there. So it happens right at 7:16. So we're just going to call this chapter 1 for now. It doesn't really matter what you call your chapters. If you want to go a little bit crazier with it, you're more than welcome to. So we're going to call this chapter 2. And let's just say that, so it's broken down into hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. So this happens at 0 hours, at 7 minutes, 16 seconds. And just like I said, let's suspend our disbelief here for a second. Let's just say that happens at frame 1. And I want my thumbnail. Let's see if there's a more interesting thumbnail. So let's say that our thumbnail's right here and we want to add a more interesting thumbnail. So this happens at 7 minutes and 34 seconds. So we'll just say hour 00:07:34, and we'll just say 01. Okay, and then for our next chapter, we have to wait for another 8 to 10 minutes. So let's go ahead. So we're at 7:16 right now. So that would be roughly at the 15-minute mark. So let's go ahead and find something around 15 minutes. So this would have been a great chapter break, but unfortunately it happens a little too early. So I think right there. So 16:39. So we're going to call chapter 3 and then 00:16:39. Again, we're suspending our disbelief for the frame count, but you know what? We'll just we'll say happens at frame 23. It's in 24 frames per second. Frame 23, that's right before it jumps over to the next second. But that's essentially all you're going to do. You're just going to keep going through every 8 to 12 minutes like it suggests, and you're just going to find the best non-disruptive places to put your chapter breaks. Just go through the entire movie. Again, make sure you're not doing this within the last 5 minutes. But other than that, I mean, this is pretty easy to do. And it's something, like I said, I think it's something that's very overlooked. I didn't do this for the first 2 years and I missed out a lot of money because of that. I've actually helped a couple of people get their films on Filmhub and they got on Tubi immediately. I would assume just because of this. Obviously, you know, there's some other factors there, but if they didn't have this, they wouldn't be getting on Tubi. I got on Tubi probably like a month after I added this to my film, and I wish I would have done it a lot sooner. So again, I hope this was helpful to you. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see other videos I've made on Filmhub, I got this great video on other tips and tricks that you should definitely watch. It's going to pop up somewhere right here. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.